Hello and welcome to FunBikes TV. My name is James and today we're going to be building one of the 1300w 48v MXR bikes. The first thing we're going to attach onto the bike is the handlebars. First of all, cut the cable ties holding them onto the front fork leg. Then remove all the packaging off the handlebars. The bubble wrap and the plastic in the centre of the handlebars. You'll see on the handlebars there are little grooves on them on both sides. These line up with the clamps to make sure you've got the bars central. We're now going to attach the handlebars onto the bike. You'll find in the bag of nuts and bolts that came with the vehicle, there are 2 handlebar clamps like this, and there are 4 short Allen key bolts like this, which are a 6mm Allen key. Position your bars onto the bike, into the clamps, using the grooves for a guide as to where they fit, making sure it's an equal amount on each side showing, and then apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. And loosely attach the first clamp. Don't fully tighten one side until you have the other side in position. Before you fully tighten down the handlebars, make sure that the rise in the handlebars is at the same angle as the fork legs. And then fully tighten your clamps down, making sure the gap at the front and the back is equal. Don't fully tighten one side of the clamp and then try and tighten down the other. You could cause the clamp to crack. Now that we've tightened our handlebar clamps up, and while we've got the 6 Allen key in our hands, we're going to make sure that the yoke bolts are tight on the bike. Using the 6 Allen key, tighten up the upper and lower yoke bolts on both sides of the bike. We are now ready to fit the front mudguard and number board to the bike. We're now going to fit the front mudguard to the vehicle. It attaches in the 3 bolt holes on the bottom yoke. You'll find in the bag of bolts there are 3 5mm Allen key bolts that attach the front mudguard on. Start off with, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads on all 3 bolts. The reason for using the stud lock or nut lock is it helps to stop bolts vibrating loose on the vehicle. However, it does not mean you don't need to do nut and bolt checks on your bikes. Loosely attach one bolt first. It doesn't matter whether you use the slotted or the round holes for the bolts in the mudguard. It just alters how far forward the mudguard will sit on the bike. I tend to use the slots on the vehicle when fitting the mudguards. Once you have all 3 bolts in loosely, fully tighten them all. Once these are fully tight, we are ready to fit the front number board onto the bike. We're now going to fit the front number board to the bike. You will need the front number board, the 2 self-tapping screws that came in the bag of nuts and bolts, and the white plastic bracket that acts as a cable hose guide. Start off with, remove the cover off the sticker, and then using the 5 Allen key, remove the 2 bolts up here that hold the number board in place. While we've got the Allen key in our hand, make sure the two bolts that hold the bracket in place are tight. Take your number board and place it over the two pins on the mudguard through the holes. Making sure that your cables and hoses are routed neatly. Then taking the two 5mm Allen key bolts that you've just removed, attach them through the top of the mudguard and back into the bracket to hold the number board in place. And then tighten these down fully once you have them both in. We're now ready to fit the bracket that holds the brake hose in place. Using a Phillips screwdriver and the self-tapping screws, place them through the bracket and align them with the mounting point on the number board, and then just screw them in. Once both are in, fully tighten them. We're now ready to fit the front wheel to the bike and the brake caliper. We're now going to fit the front wheel to the bike. The first thing we need to do is make sure that the valve locking nut on the wheel is tight using a 12 spanner. Once you're happy this is tight, we're then ready to fit the wheel itself. The axle that you removed to take the bike from the cage is what we'll be using to fit it. You will see there's two different size spacers on it. One is shorter than the other. The shorter spacer goes on the non-brake side. So slide your axle through and placing the shorter spacer on. Then if you lift your wheel up and align it with the axle, pushing it through. Once you've got the axle through, fit your longer spacer and align it in to go into place. This sometimes does take a little bit of manipulation to get it to align. However, once you've got it to align, you will wonder why you were having difficulty getting it to align in the first place, because it all slides in straight away. Using a 14 and a 17 spanner, make sure the front axle is tight. Check that the wheel spins freely and has no side-to-side play in it, and then apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread. We're now going to align and attach the brake caliper. You'll need a 5 Allen key for this. To start with, remove the bolt that is not attached to the mounting plate on the caliper, and slide the caliper down over the disc and then reattach the bolt. Make sure the upper and lower Allen key bolts are tight. And check the 2 bolts just here are nipped up as well. These are just the alignment of the caliper from side to side. So if the top or bottom of the pad is rubbing slightly on the disc, you can adjust the caliper slightly to make sure that it spins freely. Once you've checked they're tight, use an 8 spanner or socket to check the mounting plate bolts are tight. We're now ready to move on to making sure that all the plastic bolts are tight on the bike. We're now going to check all the plastic bolts are tight using 4 and 5 Allen keys. To start off with, make sure the front tank scoop mounting plates, mounting bars are tight on the bike. And then working your way down both sides of the bike, check everything else is tight on it. So using 4 Allen key for the lower ones on the main plastic body sections on both sides. And a 5 Allen key for the rear one in the mudguard just here. And repeat the process on the opposite side of the bike. We're now ready to attach the rear shock onto the bike. We're now going to fit the rear shock absorber. To start off with, remove the bubble wrap from around the shock absorber. Then using a 12 and 14 spanner combination or socket combination, because you can access it from both sides underneath the plastics, make sure the top shock bolt is tight on the bike. And apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. We're then going to remove the 2 bolts that help to mount the seat on using a 5 Allen key. In the box of parts that came with the vehicle, you'll have a large black plastic cover. This is now going to be fitted onto the bike. Take the 2 Allen key bolts you've just removed and place them through the black cover and then reattach them. Using the Allen key to make sure they're fully tight once you've got both sides in. Then remove the bolt from the shock absorber and place the cover through the bottom of the shock absorber folded back round. We're now going to attach the actual shock absorber. You'll need to lift the rear of the bike up slightly. You can do this if you've got it on the stand just underneath your knee. Once you've got it attached at the top, lift the cover up out of the way and remove the shock bolt. Placing the shock through the cover and folding it back round underneath so it sits over the top of the motor at the moment. Then if you've got the bike on the stand, which does make it a lot easier to maintain, lift the bike up using your knee, the rear swing arm, and attach the bolt back through, placing the nut on, and then using the 12 and 14 spanner, fully tighten the bolts and nut. Once it is fully tight, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread and then fold the cover back down so it sits in between the motor and the tyre and it stops any dirt and debris getting thrown onto the motor. We're now going to take the foot pegs, the rear swing arm and the stand are tight. Using a 5 and 10 Allen key to check the foot pegs. Do this on both sides of the bike. And apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads once you're happy that they're nipped up. We're then going to tighten the rear swing arm using a 14 and 17 spanner and socket combination, and make sure the rear swing arm is fully tight on the bike. Once you're happy with this, again, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads, and then you will have found in the bag of parts that came with the vehicle you had 2 black caps. These go over the swing arm once you have checked that it is tight. We're then just going to make sure the stand itself is tight using a 17 socket or spanner so that it's nipped up on there, and again apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. We're now ready to make sure the rear brake caliper and brake disc is tight. So we're now going to make sure the rear brake assembly is tight on the bike. Using a 5 Allen key, check the 2 mounting bolts, and then rotate the wheel around, checking every single disc brake bolt is tight. Okay, so again, using the 5 Allen key, we're going to make sure 2 brake mounting bolts are tight here on the top here, just like on the front caliper. If your brake is rubbing slightly, you can loosen these off and adjust the caliper from side to side. Obviously, always make sure that they're fully tight afterwards. And then the last thing we need to do on the rear wheel, well, on this side of the bike, is check that the valve locking nut is tight again using the 12 spanner. You can also use a deep reach socket for this, which does make it easier to get into. We're now going to make sure the rear sprocket bolts are tight using a 10 spanner or socket. Rotate the wheel around, checking each one individually. Once you are happy that they are tight on the bike, we then need to make sure that the chain guard is tight and the rear axle is tight. The axle will be a 14 and 17 spanner combination. Apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread once you've checked it. And then using a 5 Allen key, make sure your motor bolts are tight. And a 4 Allen key to make sure that your chain guard is tight on the bike. We're now ready to make sure the levers are at the correct angle. Then all we need to do is insert the fuse and put the bike on charge for the first time. We're now going to adjust the angle of the levers on the bike. They need to be angled approximately 30 degrees downwards for a comfortable riding position. When the levers are level or angled upwards slightly, obviously that's not a very comfortable position for your child to ride the bike. So using the 5 Allen key, loosen off the brake lever on one side and angle it down to the desired position, and then tighten that side up. Repeat the process on the opposite side, but looking across from one side to the other to make sure that your levers are level once you've tightened them up. Now that we've done this, we are ready to fit the bar pad onto the bike. This again came in the bag or box of spare parts. Remove the bar pad cover and simply place the bar pad over the top. The notch section out on it sits to the rear. We're now ready to fit the fuse to the bike and charge it for the first time. We've now fully assembled our 1300w MXR. First, we now just need to put the fuse in before we charge it for the first time. Taking one of the fuses that came in the bag, you'll place it into the red fuse holder on the right hand side of the bike. This will spark or make a popping noise when you put it in. I still jump today and I've put in thousands of them. Make sure the fuse is pushed in fully. place the cap on it and tuck it up inside the plastic so it's not dangling down catching the rider's leg. Take the keys that came with the bag and pop them into the key which is just in front of the tank scoop, and turn the bike on to make sure that everything is lighting up on it. Underneath this cover at the front, you have 3 dials. These alter the throttle response, the speed and the power of the bike. In front of the seat, you've got the flip panel just here which you can open up, and you'll find there's 3 dials. These alter the response, which is the top centre one, the speed, which is the bottom left-hand side, and the power, which is the bottom right-hand side. By rotating these around, it alters the throttle response, so how much lag there is between the child twisting the throttle and the bike actually doing something. The maximum speed of the vehicle, fully anti-clockwise is the slowest setting, turned fully clockwise is the fastest setting. And then the power, again, is anti-clockwise for the lowest setting and clockwise for the fastest setting on the bike. You can alter these before the child uses the bike and then flick the cover down. Now that we've fully assembled our bike, we're ready to put it on charge for the first time. Make sure you fit the fuse to the bike before you try charging the bike. If the fuse is not fitted, the bike will not charge. Pull the plastic cover off and then take your charger that came in the white box out. Obviously you will need to connect it to the mains using the hi-fi style lead that came with it. You will see there is a notch out of the charge point itself, and there's a little notch inside the charger as well. Align these and push the charger in. There is an LED on the charger when this is plugged into the mains. If the bike is charging, it will be red to show that it's charging. Once the bike is fully charged, this turns to green. However, for your first charge, make sure you charge the bike for 12 hours, regardless of whether the charger has turned to green or not. When you charge the bike, make sure the key is turned off and removed from the bike. We've now fully built our 1300w MXR bike. Thank you for watching FunBikes TV, and let the fun begin.